If I said to you the last year of television or the backside of television, Mitch McTaggart, welcome. Tell us the process of you taking that pilot to SBS.
I was in my apartment kind of figuring out what I could do with my time in lockdown, and had the pilot we did for 31 basically cold emailed SBS and said, hey, we made this kind of test show last year. We would like to do one this year. Would you like it? And a little bit of time went by. It wasn't like an immediate response, but then eventually got a reply on that email account. Just said, yeah, cool. Let's take it. And it was just like that. Like, it was, there was not necessarily a back and forth. It was just like a casual, yep. And so I always credit it to lockdown meant they had no other content. And so it's just like, let's just take anything. Let's put anything on air. It's fine. And that was that. And then it just kind of grew out of there.
Don't diminish it by saying anything because it's a great product. How did that transform into Foxtel and Binge?
I think from memory, someone at Binge saw a segment that we did in the 2021 last year of television, where I did a little analysis on the concept of gay turmoil in Australian TV dramas, which basically argued that whenever there is a character who is gay, they're always struggling with it to the like their sole characteristic and their purpose as a plot piece is to be having this awful time being gay, not being able to process it, trying to kill themselves, all that kind of stuff. And it just became so dreary that I wanted to just point out all the instances, how we exclusively do it in Australian TV. At that point, it was rare that there were any real positive depictions of gay characters in modern TV dramas. And that segment, got the attention of some people. I think it was this segment. I'm not actually certain. That led to them to Binge reaching out.
Talking of struggling, the big media players now struggle with that exact example. They have terrible trouble putting gay characters in their product.
Yeah, I don't really understand what it is, but I feel like with Disney especially, it's that appealing to as many people as possible, and therefore you're going to have to exclude some groups. The norm is just having straight people or having characters who don't talk about sexuality. I don't know. It's disappointing that we're still having this conversation in 2025. And I actually said during that last year of television, it's disappointing that we're still having this conversation in 2021. And we'll probably continue having it because it's just the way TV is.
It is disappointing, but I think you'll notice quite a progression in standards and community acceptance in those intervening years.
Yeah, totally. Probably doesn't mean much, but it's nice that I'm able to be this representation of queer people on a television program that is criticizing television. Like that feels like a win to me for everybody, and not just a way for me to bring the system down on the inside necessarily.
As you've already mentioned, you take your great production team from Channel 31 through to your current productions, and Mitch even puts together the sets, transports the sets, all those sort of things, which is pretty rare for someone on camera.
Me moving the sets stuff is predominantly a budgetary thing, but also I think it's important that I do that kind of stuff because I feel like it keeps me grounded, and like it's I don't like the idea of a celebrity who doesn't do anything other than rock up and read the auto cue. Like, I think that time for those people is gone. It's like long gone. And the it's kind of going back to that having to be multidisciplinary to be able to make it in the industry these days. And so it's a thing that I accept as a necessity, that this is the way that the show happens.
You talk about accessibility, and you've got fairly strong views on formality in television.
Yeah, totally. And I think as well, it's also about me being the conduit for the viewers. Like I'm watching Australian TV for the audience, essentially. And so I still want to kind of maintain that connection. And I don't just mean that means me moving a set occasionally. I mean that to be able to kind of like I'm with you guys when I'm watching TV and when I'm showing you the kind of stuff that we found. And I don't think that works as well if I'm, a guy in a suit that looks fancy or whatever. I think that breaks that connection, that familiarity, or the I had to use the word relatability because we really overuse that in Australian TV. But basically relatability, I think that applies with something like this.
And if you look at social media now, it's all about relatability.
That particular instance of relatability drives me nuts because it's like I hate how we've leaned into it so much to the point where it's almost starting to be inorganic again. So like the very nature of relatability is itself unrelatable because so many people are doing it. I feel like the solution to, say, Australian content is not having more relatable people. Like I think a problem is that everything is too relatable. And Australian dramas, for instance, are so driven by how can we make all these characters relatable? And when we're doing that all the time, they're not as engaging. Like I would love to see characters I despise on Australian TV drama, or just insufferable, awful people, rich billionaires, just being awful, that kind of stuff. Like we've really, the pendulum has swung too far in relatability on Australian TV, especially, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're a little bit sick of it.
It's interesting you talk more about the machinations than the content.
Yeah, I think that's probably another thing that I thought was lacking in Australian TV criticism, in that, like, yes, anybody can talk about what's in a show, but I think it's always interesting in how a show comes to be, or the fallout of a show airing, just the cultural impact of a before or after of something going to air.
Okay, so just satisfy the nerd in me for a moment, please, and talk about the research and writing process.
I'd love to. So, depending on the kind of story that we're doing, it might begin with watching a bunch of DVD box sets, or going to the National Film and Sound Archive and just watching a bunch of random stuff to see if there's any kind of story or something that can pop out of it. It also can involve looking at old newspapers and just old TV guides or old TV reviews of stuff. Sometimes it involves having to physically go to the State Library, looking through newspapers on microfilm, which is romantic for about 5 minutes. And then after that, it just sucks because you're having to assume that the person who put them onto microfilm did it in order, did it with the correct date, did them the right way up. And there are all these extra considerations that if any of those things apply, it adds an extra maybe 10 seconds to the page that you're looking at. But when you're looking at hundreds of pages, that adds up to hours. I had seen in an interview, Bert Newton was interviewing somebody, I forget who it was, but mentioned during the interview to the guest, really loved the article in the Melbourne Herald recently. So that's all. Melbourne Herald recently. Like, okay, sure. Sounds like an article that I want to look at. Let's let's try and find the broadcast date of the episode first. So located that, and then decided whatever is considered recently from that point. So I gave myself a 2-week period, a 2-week scope. Like that feels recently to me. So
Sounds reasonable.
exactly. So the Melbourne Herald is not digitized, so it has to be a physical thing at the State Library. In I go, kind of start on a date, start leafing through it, and it takes a long time. And at the end of the first day, I find an article, kind of smallish, that's written by this person that is like, okay, I guess that's what he was talking about. And I read it, and it's not really that comprehensive. It doesn't really seem worth it. So I go home, I think about it, I watch the interview again, and it's like, I don't think this is the article he was talking about. So I go back into the State Library again, go through it some more, spend another like 4 hours, and then find a much, much bigger article that was clearly the article they were talking about. It is relevant to my point that of the segment that I was proposing. And so I take it home, but then through the making of the rest of the show, the segment gets canned anyway because it's not really relevant to what I'm talking about anymore. And that's that. And so the even if that article had been included and if the segment had gone in the direction that it was going to, that little newspaper clip would have been on screen for 3 seconds, if that, and that's it.
Well, you mentioned that segment was canned. Who makes that decision? Is it you or your team or combination?
That was me, that one. With all the other segments that were kind of growing and germinating at the time, this one was starting to feel a little bit too similar in the type of criticism and the type of content that we were looking at to another segment. So we just kind of left it. But that could also mean that, it's looked at again next series, or it could be now a little mini segment in the last year of television, because the things that it takes very little for us to be able to link a thing now, because I think I've got such a broad document of little threads or little pieces of stuff that I can refer to at any point and make a joke out of or make some other kind of reference to. So it'll definitely come back, but it's just it's just a bit annoying that it wasn't as grand as what I wanted it to be. Like, you feel like you're investigating Watergate and then you're just not.
At least there will be a payoff eventually for those hours.
Exactly.
To finish, I think we should talk about some of the themes of the show, or themes that we've spoken about today. For example, we have touched on it, comedy now versus comedy then.
I grew up post the 80s. So, like, outside of the influence of, say, Paul Hogan's show or 80s era Hey Hate Saturday. And so I know that there's quite a passionate debate with what you can say now versus what you could say beforehand. And that has never really affected me at all. And my position on all that is that even before we consider whether or not we can say something now versus before, is that comedy is entirely based around the unexpected and being new and fresh. And I wouldn't want to do the kinds of jokes or stuff that we've already done in the 70s and 80s, because we've already done them. And it's not, even before we consider whether or not they're offensive, they've been done. And the last thing I want to do is the same kind of stuff. And so I'm always kind of confused when people kind of like long for the good old days of comedy, and it just doesn't ring true for me.
So when you're researching a program that may have been in the 70s or 80s or 90s even, you're not surprised by some of the things that are said or done?
Yeah, sometimes. Like, I think one of the main things with our show is that we give everything as much context as we can. And I'm always so hesitant to kind of play a stray clip and go, look at this. isn't this bit racist? Look at this, isn't this like isn't this offensive? Like it's too easy, I think. And in a lot of cases not particularly fair. And so we only really deploy that when we do want a quick joke, which we hope does not form the basis of what our kind of ethos is when we put the show together.
We're seeing it now. Does TV news and current affairs sometimes create the story rather than cover it?
Oh, absolutely. There was definitely a time in the 70s and 80s when commercial news in particular was seen as more of a service that networks had to kind of begrudgingly apply as a condition of their broadcasting license. But since then, TV is now just so radically different, where news is the breadwinner for a network, and they've gone all in on just panic-inducing content, making you fear every single thing, and just keeping you stressed out and keeping you watching. And the decline of that quality, I guess, is particularly jarring to watch.
Well, given that, where do you think TV is heading?
I don't know, it could be a t-shirt shop in a couple of years. No, I think, look, TV is always going to be around. I don't buy into the theory that it's just going to all be in the bin in 10 years. Like it will continue on in some form. And I'm talking about broadcast television. There'll be probably some change with the specific lineup of networks or whatever. Even if it all collapses in a heap, it will still emerge again and continue on, because I think it may not look like it now, but there will always be a function of free-to-air TV that streaming services and other kind of entertainment platforms don't have, because it's just something that is always there, that is linear, that is always broadcasting. I think there's always going to be an appeal for that, I think.
So as the new generations come into play, you don't feel that linear is going to be a thing of the past?
No, it'll still be around. I mean, I could be completely wrong. Who knows? I'm not Nostradamus here, but the idea that it'll disappear just seems too excessive, considering everything, like the cultural impact of it, or the kind of ratings it can attract, or like there's certainly some pared back version of TV at the very least that will persist on.
The end of the project, Q&A and Neighbours, again, long-running programs providing employment to and training to many people. Up until the early 2000s, there were plenty of comedy and variety programs as well. Many have disappeared. Some things have partially migrated to social media. One of the things that cheaper production facilities and social media has allowed is the so-called democratization of television. There are few, if any, barriers to entry. Is it as good as it seems?
There is something good about a barrier to entry in that it does stop every man, woman, and child trying to get on TV for their 15 minutes of fame and stuff, despite their lack of skill. And so, as much as I love everybody can now do this kind of thing, provided they're good at it, obviously, there are a lot of people who genuinely suck at it and have a platform regardless. And that,
right,
I think, is creating and that is creating a massive kind of saturation of available content, when it makes it harder to find the good stuff, first and foremost. But also it is exactly the kind of circumstances that stuff like reality TV can absolutely thrive off. Like Married at First Sight is just brimming with awful people going on because they're awful, and their entire thing that they have to do is be awful to everybody else. And that wouldn't have existed, I don't think, if social media hadn't created those kinds of reward systems for people who just have a platform because they're awful.
Right. So social media has really given birth to reality TV in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the kind of without reality TV, especially, there would be a bunch of people, you know, just sitting at home being awful to their cat or something. I don't know. It's just I really dislike the rise of reality TV, and I don't like it how it's such a crutch for free-to-air networks, especially because it's not particularly easy to produce. It's not necessarily cheaper than stuff. I think a lot of people assume that it is cheaper, but when you're dealing with, just filming a bunch of stuff, there's obviously a lot of post-production costs on that. And it annoys me how it rates so consistently as well, which is probably, sure, the public has spoken, it's around forever. But I think it is such a anti-content type of content. I think it's the least creative thing that TV can make.
Mitch McTaggart, I have to thank you very much for your insight and for the shows that you make.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Plenty more fascinating chats to come. Like, subscribe. See you soon.